Now, I know that in some parts of the world, the words Muslim and music are not often linked together in the public mind, but they should be. The cultural heritage of Islam has long embraced musical language as an elemental expression of human spirituality. Listening to music, practicing music, sharing music, performing music have long been an intimate part of life for Muslim communities across the world, as has been the chanting of devotional and historical or epic texts. I learned at a young age how my own ancestors, the Fatimids, cultivated music in the city of Cairo 1,000 years ago. And I also learned about how the Iberian region, where we are now meeting, the territory known as Al-Andalus, produced new forms of music and poetry in the late medieval period. It was here, in Al-Andalus, that Muslims, Jews, Christians created together an exemplary culture of tolerance, fostering musical creativity that even included new types of musical instruments and pioneering approaches to music education. I also remember a visit I made to Tajikistan in 1995, during which I was deeply impressed by the richness of musical life among those whom I had visited. I began to think even more about the ways in which music can bring a strong cultural anchor, deepening a sense of community, identity, and heritage, while simultaneously reaching out in powerful ways to people of different backgrounds.
یا علی مدد، سلام علیکم، بینوینو. با بستاب جمعه شب دیگری خوش آمدید. فرصت برای حضور جماعت ما در کنار هم، بحث در مورد موضوعات جالب، در حالی که بچه های ما همزمان به طریق مشغول به گوش دادن گفتگوهای گروهی با دوستانشان و پیمایش خبرهای تیک تاک خودشان هستند. سلام بسیار ویژه‌ای نیز به اعضای خانواده‌های چند باوری ما. من زلیخا نتو هستم. من تقریباً 20 سال است که روزنامه‌نگار هستم و اولین بار است که میزبان این برنامه می باشم. بنابراین از فرح، عمر، زین و همه دوستان رسانه‌ای من در کانادا به دلیل در دسترس نبودنشان تشکری می کنم و در خانه از شما متشکرم که راحت‌ترین لباس‌های خود را می پوشید و ما را با اتاق‌های نشیمنتان دعوت می کنید. این یک برنامه زنده نیست، بلکه یک برنامه کاملا ویرایش شده و بسته‌بندی شده از آتلانتای جورجیا است، جایی که طی چند ماه گذشته یک یا دو رویداد خبری روی داده است. من نمیدانم، شاید در مورد آن شنیده باشید. مضمون موسیقی امشب برای من کاملا منطبق است، زیرا من چندین سال را به عنوان خبرنگار هنر و سرگرمی گذراندم. من جوایز مانند اسکار و گرمی را پوشش دادم و با بزرگترین نام‌ها در هالیوود مصاحبه کردم. بنابراین ممکن است کار من را از طریق اخبار CBC در لس آنجلس و تورنتو و اخیراً با BBC بدانید. اما اشتباه نکنید، من اصالتاً اهل کلگری هستم. 403 مکان دلخواه من است. من هنوز کانادا را خانه خود می‌دانم، اما مهم نیست که در کجا زندگی می‌کنیم. چیزی که همه ما را متحد می‌کند موسیقی است. فکر کن آیا کسی تا به حال به شما گفته است موسیقی نه، من دوستش ندارم؟ این عجیب خواهد بود، زیرا موسیقی این قدرت را دارد که موانع را از بین ببرد، پیام‌های اجتماعی و سیاسی را حمل کند و جوامع را به هم نزدیک کند. به همین دلیل هنر برای سلامتی روانی، رفاه و بقای ما بسیار حیاتی است. بخش افتتاحیه ما از جوایز موسیقی آقا خان در لیسبون پرتغال بود. بنابراین امیدواریم که از آن لذت برده باشید. ما امشب یک نمایش خارق العاده را برای شما داریم، از جمله گفتگو با کسی که درست در وسط این اقدامات موسیقی قرار دارد، مدیر برنامه موسیقی آقا خان. ما همچنین از زبان برخی از هنرمندان با استعداد کانادایی خواهیم شنید و در مورد روند ساخت موسیقی اطلاعات کسب خواهیم کرد. بنابراین بیایید برنامه خود را با مکالمه رئیس امیرعلی قاسم لاکا به عنوان آخرین قسمت از قلب شروع کنیم.
My dear brothers and sisters, Yali Wadad. برادران و خواهران عزیزم، یا علی مدد. امشب آخرین جلسه بحث در مجموعه از قلب است که هر هفته درباره یک ویژگی مهم برای موفقیت در دنیای امروز در مورد آن بحث می‌کنیم. امروز درباره اهمیت مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری صحبت می‌کنیم. مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری داشتن ظرفیت سازگاری و تحمل در برابر مشکلات است. این یک واقعیت است که هر یکی از ما در طول زندگی خود با موانع غیر قابل پیش بینی روبرو خواهیم شد. ما بعضاً در مسائل زندگی خود، در کسب و کار خود، در رابطه های خود و سلامت خود دچار مشکلات می شویم. اینها جزئی از زندگی ما است که نمی توانیم از آن فرار کنیم. پس وظیفه ما این است که با هوشیاری و شهامت با آنها روبرو شویم. با این تفکر که عقب نشینی نتواند بر ما چیره شود، بلکه این مشکلات زمینه برای رشد، معنادار بودن زندگی و دستاوردها باشد. وقتی این مسئله را پذیرفتیم، می توانیم با دید مثبت با مشکلات مقابله کنیم، سازوکار دفاعی ایجاد کنیم و تعادل را حفظ نماییم. اجازه دهید سه روش را که می توانیم برای ایجاد مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری در پیش گیریم برایتان توضیح دهم. خوشبینی، باخبری یا آگاهی و ایمان داشتن. بگذارید با خوشبینی شروع کنم. خوشبینی دریچه‌ای است که از طریق آن می توانیم بقایه زندگی، آرزوها و اطمینان به حال و آینده را ببینیم. معروف است که چرچل می گفت که یک شخص بدبین در هر فرصتی مشکل را می بیند، در حالی که یک شخص خوشبین در هر مشکلی یک فرصت را می بیند. خوشبینی خوشخیالی یا نادیده گرفتن مشکلات نیست، بلکه جستجوی فعال برای پیدا کردن یک روزنه امید است. دیدن نیمه پر یک لیوان است. تحقیقات نشان داده است که افراد خوشبین احساس سلامتی بیشتر می کنند، روابط قوی دارند و در محیط کار زودتر رشد می کنند. وقتی ما مثبت هستیم، مردم به سوی ما جلب می شوند، زیرا ما منبع آرامش و امید به آینده هستیم. به نظر می رسد که همگیری کووید 19 برای بسیاری یک شکست بوده است که باعث ایجاد اختلال در زندگی شخصی و شغلی آنها شده است. بعضی افراد این شکست را شکست شخصی خود می دانند، اما افراد خوشبین آن را فرصت خوب برای پیشرفت می دانند. آنها برای کمک به راهنمایی مربیان مراجعه می کنند و از شبکه‌های ارتباطی خود برای کشف افق‌های جدید استفاده می کنند. مؤسسات از طریق ابتکارات آینده‌نگر مانند پروگرام‌های آینده کار و مربیگری آموزش سریع، زمان و منابع قابل توجهی را برای حمایت از جماعت اختصاص داده است و ما جماعت را تشویق می‌کنیم که از این پروگرام‌ها استفاده کنند. صرف نظر از این که تا چند ماه دیگر این همگیری ادامه می‌یابد، خوشبین بودن یعنی یافتن راه‌های برای استفاده مطلوب از زمانی است که در آن قرار داریم و تمرکز کردن بر آینده قوی‌تر که در پیش روی ماست. دومین ابزار مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری باخبری و آگاهی است. ما به عنوان انسان شکست‌ها را از نظر جسمی و عاطفی تجربه می‌کنیم. استرس پیدا می‌کنیم و ذهن ما برای چاره‌سازی‌های غیر مؤثر سرگردان می‌شوند. باخبری و آگاهی پذیرش شکست‌هایی است که در زندگی رخ می‌دهد و ما آنها را تغییر دادن نمی‌توانیم، اما می‌توانیم نحوه برخورد و پاسخگویی به این چنین وقایع را انتخاب کنیم. وقتی ما آگاه هستیم، می‌دانیم در کجا قرار داریم و در عین زمان می‌دانیم در هر لحظه چه احساسی داریم. بنابراین می‌توانیم بر خود کنترل داشته باشیم تا آن واقعه را به نحوی بپذیریم. ما افراد را می‌بینیم که شکست‌ها را ناکامی شخصی می‌دانند و می‌گذارند که بر همه جنبه‌های زندگی آنها غلبه کند، در حالی که آنهایی که آگاه هستند تشخیص می‌دهند که شکست‌ها از شرایط خارج از کنترل ما ناشی می‌شوند. آنها شخصی نیستند و ما نباید اجازه دهیم که بر سلامت ما، بر روابط ما و کلاً بر زندگی ما تأثیر نامطلوب بگذارند. نهایتاً قدرتمندترین ابزار برای ایجاد مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری ایمان داشتن است. دین و ایمان مشکلات ما را در چارچوب مشخص تعریف می کند و ما یادآوری می کند که ما در این دنیا برای یک هدف بزرگتری خلق شده ایم که فراتر از فراز و نشیب زندگی روزمره است که تجربه می کنیم. مولانا سلطان محمد شاه علیه السلام فرموده بود که ناکامی باید فراموش شود و تلاش‌های جدید صورت گیرد. ناامیدی معصیت است و امید بخش مهمی از دین و ایمان است، هم در رابطه با ثروت مادی و هم مهمتر از همه در رابطه با روشندلی معنوی. دین و ایمان به ما می‌آموزد که به زندگی با امید نگاه کنیم و یاد داشته باشیم که خداوند بیش از آنچه تصور می‌کنیم ما را دوست دارد و از ما مراقبت و محافظت می‌کند هنگامی که در سختی‌ها به او پناه می‌بریم و رضای او را طلب می‌کنیم. اینها فضیلت دینداری و ایمان داشتن است که ما را در سختی‌ها کمک می‌کند و ما را به معنویت نزدیک می‌کند. برادران و خواهران عزیزم، ایجاد مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری به زمان نیاز دارد. این موضوعی است که ممکن است برای اعضای مسن جماعت ما آسان‌تر باشد، زیرا آنها دیدگاه گسترده‌تری به زندگی دارند و فراز و نشیب‌های آن را تجربه کرده‌اند. مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری غالباً به صورت طبیعی به فرزندان ما که برای اولین بار دچار شکست می‌شوند منتقل نمی‌شود. بیایید با آنها کمک کنیم تا اهمیت خودآگاهی، خویشتن‌داری و آرامش در شرایط استرس را درک کنند. بیایید مقاومت و انعطاف پذیری آنها را از طریق تعیین هدف، پذیرفتن تغییر و فعال ساختن احساسات مثبت در آنها تقویت کنیم. مهمتر از همه با آنها یادآوری کنیم که در هنگام سختی مهم است که با منابع حمایتی در ارتباط باشند، برای دیگران مفید باشند و گرایش به بقا را تقویت کنند. قبل از پایان این بحث یک موضوع دیگر نیز وجود دارد. تیم برنامه آینده کار یک واحد آموزشی نیروی فروش را به طور آزمایشی برای جماعت در نظر گرفته است. نیروی فروش یک نرم افزار کامپیوتری است که خدمات ارتباط با مشتری، بازاریابی اتوماتیک و تجزیه و تحلیل تجاری را فراهم می‌کند. بعد از ختم آموزش، شرکت کنندگان به عنوان مدیران نیروی فروش می توانند استخدام شوند، نقشی که در حال حاضر تقاضای بسیار دارد. این برنامه آزمایشی اولین ابتکاری از مجموعه برنامه‌های صدور گواهینامه است که ما آن را برای جماعت تسهیل کرده ایم و این برنامه را با شرکایمان که به دنبال استخدام هستند اجرا می‌کنیم. هیچ آموزش قبلی در مورد مهارت کامپیوتری لازم نیست. تیم آینده کار همچنین مربیان و کارمندان رایح را استخدام می‌کند. برای اطلاعات بیشتر لطفاً به وبسایت آینده کار به صورت منظم مراجعه کنید. تشکر از توجه شما و خدا حافظ.
از رئیس صاحب ممنونم که این افکار را با ما در میان گذاشتند. امشب ما این امتیاز را داریم که مدیر برنامه موسیقی آقا خان فیروز نیشانووا را با خود داشته باشیم. فیروز یک متخصص توسعه فرهنگی است و عاشق مدام العمر به هنرهای نمایشی، موسیقی و رقص است. من خودم را یک شهروند جهانی می‌دانم به خاطر همه مکان‌هایی که در آن زندگی کردم، اما او یک شهروند جهانی واقعی است. او در سریلانکا از پدر و مادر ازبک به دنیا آمد. در عمان اردن بزرگ شد. در دانشگاه دولتی مسکو تحصیل کرد و سپس به دانشکده اقتصاد لندن رفت. وی از سال 2005 به عنوان مدیر برنامه موسیقی آقا خان در بنیاد فرهنگی آقا خان مستقر در ژنو فعالیت می‌کند. با توجه به این یادداشت، ما می‌خواهیم قبل از اینکه وارد گفتگو با فیروز شویم، یک فیلم کوتاه درباره برنامه موسیقی آقا خان به شما نشان دهیم.
If you want to go north, go south. And that more or less describes the circuitous path that has now led finally to the implementation of the Music Awards. It was back in 2001 that my brother launched in Central Asia the Aga Khan Music Initiative, as it was then called, with the aim of helping to preserve and revitalize traditional folk, classical and devotional music in the region.
The Aga Khan Music Initiative has been a pioneer in the emerging field of cultural development. It was given a mission to help revitalize musical traditions that had been in many ways devastated by the experience of the Soviet Union.
So we went and dealt with what was needed the most, and that was the revival of traditional and time-honored method of music education, the master apprentice or the ustad shagird. And then, because we live in the 21st century, we had to not only revive it, but also make it relevant to the kids, the students of today. It's a 3 or 4 day event that offers a panoramic view of the artistic excellence throughout the world of the Great East. And I'm so happy that through the vision of His Highness and Prince Amin, it was the city of Lisbon that was chosen to celebrate the first awards. Because historically it made perfect sense. It's literally at the crossroads of the great Western and Eastern civilization.
Fairouz, thank you so much for joining us today. So let's get right into it. First of all, what makes the Aga Khan Music Programme particularly important now and in these times?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It really is a pleasure and an honor. And I think as a disclaimer, I need to say that my work is not work. It's pure passion and dedication. So I would celebrate its importance on the daily basis and not necessarily at the time that is considered challenging for so many of us. And I think what really makes the importance and underlines the importance of the music program at this particular moment is that we begin to understand that the concept of music and art as pure entertainment is completely false. And especially for so many of us who come from the East, if we divide the world into West and East, then historically in the East, music is not something that was ever viewed as just only entertainment, something that you buy a ticket to go to and listen to for a period of time. On the contrary, it was and remains something that is an instrument for the history to be passed down from one generation to another. This is how the rituals, the norms of behavior are explained and taught. This is also how storytelling is celebrated, right? This is what separates us human beings from so many other forms of life. The music program, because it started so many years ago and because it started without a dictated kind of format, it was able and it was given the permission to evolve and to change with the needs of our main beneficiaries, with the needs of our audience. Because it's something, it's a program that is so much alive and so much in touch with those who are its main consumers. It gives comfort, it gives education, it gives mentorship, it gives healing, and it answers very difficult questions, difficult to ask, and sometimes even more difficult to answer. It answers those questions at the time when those answers are most needed.
You mentioned comfort and healing, and I'm wondering how you see music helping people right now cope with some really deep-seated emotions like anxiety and a little bit of sadness and loneliness. How do you think music can help people through those situations?
Very much so. I think I was always on some level aware of how powerful an instrument music is and music education is. But I think I really came face to face with it when back in 2012 and 2013, the music program, we were already quite established as music educators and mentors. But we were called upon by an extraordinary NGO called Action for Hope that delivers art in form of education and healing to displaced communities worldwide, but primarily in the Middle East. And what I saw face to face is that a child who went through a particularly difficult form or a repercussion from an armed conflict is usually unable to say what exactly happened to them. If you ask them to dance it or to draw it, to paint it, to sing it, to play it, even if they don't know how to play a musical instrument. Somehow that difficult story comes out. And once it's out, it stops being a poison. It stops being something that controls the lives of a person. When the problem is not fully dealt with, it becomes something akin to a poison. And that to me was really seeing this extraordinary power of art and art education and music education when it's given in the right form, when it's given not as something that is imposed, not as something that is light entertainment, but when it's given as a tool for expression, a tool for self-expression. Its power is exceptional and extraordinary. And I'm so privileged to be able to continue making sure that this kind of toolkits are available to children and adults worldwide in all the countries in which AKDN works, but even beyond that through those extraordinary means of communications that all of us have become so familiar with in the last few months.
It seems like music can be such a source of comfort. So maybe walk us through what the music program is all about, especially for people who might not be familiar with it. What's your vision? How are you trying to carry out that vision?
We've only become known as Aga Khan Music Programme at the end of last year, at the end of sort of in the middle towards the end of 2020. The music initiative, as it was then known, Aga Khan Music Initiative, was launched by His Highness the Aga Khan in 2000, in the year 2000. And what happened back in late 90s and early 2000 is that AKDN as a network made a commitment to the region of Central Asia. AKDN is really well known for its concept and its defense and its sort of daily incarnation of the integrated approach to development. That is to say that development is delivered to our country clients and country regions as an integrated model between economic, social, and cultural development. It is believed, His Highness believes, and all of us believe, that the development goals are best achieved when all of these components of development practices are seen as a joint undertaking, as a joint project. And that's when its benefits become more apparent and also much more long-lasting. So when we made, as a network, when we made the commitment to the region of Central Asia, and later, a couple of years later, Afghanistan, what happened is that the countries were just coming out from under the Soviet rule, from under decades of the Soviet rule. There were two generations that had very little connection to their own artistic roots, to their own musical and artistic expression of the land that their grandparents grew up with. And so when you don't have a foundation on which, and education, of course, is a foundation on which pretty much anything can be built. But when that is broken and when that is absent, that means that the next step, the creative step, becomes impossible. So when the music program, that's when the music program really was created. We had, on the one hand, a apparent breakdown in the music and arts education when it came to traditional music. And on the other hand, we had the commitment to the region that AKDN made. And then the cultural development wing could not immediately fulfill. So when the music program, at that point Music Initiative, was created, it was really first and foremost arts and music education program. We had to go into the regions, we had to find the masters, traditional masters, who still had the ability to teach their knowledge and craft, those who were still willing to do so. So we had to find the masters, find those who still had ability, knowledge, and desire to share their craft and to pass it on to the next generation of both artists and audiences. We then had to give them the most basic financial and administrative needs to enable them to teach. We then had to ensure that this is the kind of art form that became recognized and respected again, not only in their home countries, but also abroad, which meant creation of the performance program on top of the education program. We then began producing this music, so we became a very unlikely kind of music producers and partners. And then a few years into this, realized that we could only preserve the tradition and help the tradition in a very limited way if we continuously wrapped it in this preservation blanket. But to really help it grow, it had to be developed, not only preserved. And that, of course, could not happen in a vacuum. So we had to then connect this newly created artistic communities that we were nurturing in Central Asia. We had to connect them with the arts communities and musicians and creators in the regions and countries that they always shared historic connections with. So we became the promoters of East-East fusion and East-East music creations, which is something that we continue to do today.
I find it fascinating that you have people who have endured so much and have seen and witnessed so much conflict, and music is so central to their lives and their fulfillment that they are willing to do anything to make it happen in any form. And I want to bring that idea a little bit closer to home now, because what I find in a lot of our communities, especially in the West, is I hear and I see a lot of focus on especially families wanting to steer kids in very traditional careers or métiers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, that kind of thing. And music is often a very kind of footnote in people's lives. And I'm curious if you can offer some advice. What should families do when they see that perhaps their child is gifted or has such a passion for music? How can we as a community support musicians to realize that potential?
Oh, that is a wonderful question, and I wish there was a single answer that could sort of put everything in its order. Look, music and musical arts are particular in a sense that any other profession you can pretty much learn. No matter how difficult it is to become a lawyer or a really good doctor, it's something that after years of learning and after years of practice could be coaxed into becoming your own. It could be coaxed into becoming a profession. That cannot be done in the creative sphere of music and musical arts unless there is a talent that needs to be shaped in the very beginning. So talent is something that is either given or not. It's also given to a very gifted surgeon or a physician. But musical talent, in my experience, is something that is very difficult to contain. And those who are lucky to be in a possession of that talent usually are almost unable to control that. It's something that has to be expressed. It's something that has to be learned. And we as community, as parents, the best that we can do is to give those who are so gifted the ability to learn the basic tools of that language that they already possess, but not necessarily know how to use. So as long as we give them an environment that is both nurturing and supportive in helping them understand what are the basic steps in learning the letters of this new language that they seem to speak, then the talent will speak for itself. And there's no need to limit our ability to learn to a single profession. There are wonderful politicians who remain extraordinary artists, and on the other, and vice versa, there are wonderful gifted artists who later become masters of another profession. I think as community we need to recognize the basic and most important role of the arts in any community.
It's so interesting because one of the beautiful things I think about AKDN that really separates it from other international development networks is that it has very long-term goals, right? And I'm just curious how in that kind of scenario, how do you measure success with a program like this? Because culture and arts is so subjective. And so when you feel like you have taken flight or artists that have worked with you are doing really well, how do you measure that? Is it, they get a recording contract, they can make a career of what they're doing, they can collaborate with Beyonce and Jay-Z, or is it just that they're happy doing what they do and can maybe inspire people in the future? What is your measure these days and looking ahead of success for the program?
That's an extraordinary question. Well put. And they do collaborate. One of the winners of the Aga Khan Music Awards in 2019 dropped away from communication for a little bit, and I was wondering what was happening with her. And she explained to me that she was working on this collaboration, and she wasn't quite sure who the person was. And to cut the long story very short, she was featured on the lead single of Beyonce's latest album. So that probably for a Westerner, that is.
I just use Beyonce as an example. That is so cool.
That is quite a measure of success. But I'll tell you a story that happened to me back in 2008, I think, or 2009. We tried celebrating this new form of art that we were so happily cultivating and creating. We tried celebrating it through putting it on stages in the West, because, you know, it's ironic that the recognition abroad very often brings respect at home. So we tried celebrating it on Western stages, but the stages that were not known for presenting the kind of music, the kind of art that we were putting on those stages. So instead of going to the places that would readily welcome sort of not very known form of music, we wanted to put it on grandiose stages, such as Carnegie Hall, such as the English National Opera, such as Théâtre de l'Odéon in Paris. And once the invitation from Carnegie Hall came in, to me, as someone who grew up mostly in the West, that was a given, because the position and the reputation and the prestige of Carnegie Hall is not something that you ever question. You get the invitation, you go there. And I was surrounded by artists from 6 different countries, from the Silk Route region. And one of them, who was from Kyrgyzstan, and he was the most extraordinary epic storyteller, epic story narrator. He received the date, and he nodded, and then he looked up at me and said, "I can't make it on that date." And we were about 9 months away from the event, and I was sort of astonished, and I asked him what was so important that he couldn't make it to the performance at Carnegie Hall. And he said, well, 3 villages down from mine, there is a storyteller competition, a manaschi competition. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father have always competed in that village. It's once a year. So I have to be there. If I don't go this year, I will have broken the tradition that lasted through generations. I cannot be allowed to do that. I will not be respected and recognized. And how will I be able to teach after that? And it was such an education for me, because for him, something that happened miles away on the stage of Carnegie Hall was of no importance whatsoever. But the reputation he had in his community as not only carrier of the tradition, but also educator, was not something that he was willing to compromise. So I learned a lot in that instance.
I love that story, and how one thing that's important to one artist might not mean the same to another one. I'm curious, if we take a step back now and try to look at the bigger picture with political divisions, how can music help people to understand each other better?
Well, the extraordinary power of it is that it is unable to show the hidden faces, the faces of a community that are so often completely marred by conflict, by negative publicity. If you were ethnically an Easterner, then you'd be forgiven for thinking that East, global East, is something that is a continuous and permanent source of either conflict or disruption. And you'd be forgiven for no longer knowing that historically the global East served as a cradle of so many creations and so many discoveries, be it in art, be it in music, be it in poetry, be it in astronomy or medicine. And I think this is the kind of heritage that is not only to be celebrated, but it's also something that can give a community, a country, and a region completely different level of understanding. That's why for us, it was so important to create the Aga Khan Music Awards, which celebrate excellence in the arts and excellence in music for anyone, no matter which nationality, which geography, which part of the world that person were to come from. It celebrates excellence, and it celebrates the influence of Islam, of Muslim cultures. There will be one element that will connect modernity to that element of tradition that will give it its name, its passport, its identity, its geographic location. But at the same time, it will not bring with it any kind of negative connotations or dogma. It will just celebrate beauty in the form in which it was conceived and in the form in which it is taken by generations today and made into their own creation.
Why don't you share with us your own story, because it's pretty fascinating where you've traveled and what you've learned along the way.
That is the longest question for me to answer. I haven't quite learned. Look, I'm the product of what put me together. I was born in Sri Lanka and brought up for the first few years of my life between Sri Lanka, Maldives and India. I then lived the very large part of my childhood in the Middle East between Jordan, Lebanon, and at that point wider into the region. I studied very briefly in Uzbekistan and then also in Russia and then mostly in the UK. I've worked in the US and in Russia and then back in Russia as well. And then I've been a citizen and a dweller of Switzerland for many, many years. And what I think gave me a language of expression is the fact that I found my passion in AKDN, because this organization, through its commitment to pluralism, recognizes that our work, just like pluralism itself, and His Highness put that very well once, it's a process and it's never a finished product. So through making that process my own on a daily basis, I'm able to not only validate my own identity, but also celebrate everything that contributed to it, no matter which continent that was done in.
Fairouz, thank you so much for speaking with us today. What a joy to hear your stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Anytime. It's a pleasure and honor.
چی گفتگوی عالی. فیروز همچنین گفت اگر گاهی با بیانسی ملاقات کند مطمئناً سعی خواهد کرد تا برخی از تیشرت ها و وسایل رایگان او را در اختیار ما قرار دهد. نه، شوخی بود. او اصلا این حرف را نزده است. خب اکنون ما می‌خواهیم از برخی از هنرمندان کانادایی در جامعه خود بشنویم. آنها از سراسر کانادا هستند و نه تنها علاقه خود را به موسیقی دنبال می‌کنند، بلکه آن را به اوج‌های جدید می‌رسانند. و هنوز والدین آنها مخفیانه آرزو می‌کنند که فقط به دانشکده پزشکی مراجعه کنند. شوخی کردم. لذت ببرید.
Hello, my name is Amin Bhatia, and I am a composer of music for film and television. I've been doing this for about 35, close to 40 years. Doing that professionally. As someone who loves music, I think I've been doing that all my life.
The story that my family tells is that I would come home, and typically from Jamakana, from Kane, and play some of the melodies that I heard from Ginans or Thasbi or things like that on the piano. And this is something that I still love to do today in recreating music that I hear.
My tabla journey started by watching my dad perform drums for Kushali band. He used to ask me to perform percussions for him, and when I did, that's when I knew I loved performing for others. On March 21st, 2018 was the biggest highlight of my tabla journey. I was asked to perform for the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, at a Nowruz celebration. Not only did I perform for the Prime Minister of Canada, but I also had an opportunity to get interviewed by Global News. Outside of Jumati programs, I have had an opportunity to perform at a national India competition where I ranked 3rd in my category.
As a composer, I enjoy exploring the ontology of music, stretching it and pushing it to its furthest limits, while creating a coherent voice based around the global village. Very much a concept of the 21st century and an expectation of the pluralistic society that we live in, to fuse influences that would otherwise never be fused together.
Actually, I started performing in Jamaat Khana in the Nowruz celebration. The Mukisab called me and said, do you want to start? Do you want to perform in Nowruz? I said, Mukisab, it's my first time. I never performed in live events, so for me it's kind of difficult. He said, you know what? Let's try it. And after that, I got a lot of positive comment from Jamaat. They say you have a great voice. They said you're singing very good. So after that, I got more motivated and I started singing more.
As my interest in Indian classical music grew deeper, I realized that I needed to go to India to study the tradition further. And my guru, my mentor here, was also encouraging me to do the same. So I decided to apply for different grants and scholarships, and those grants took me to India, sort of back and forth over a 2-year period, when I studied from master teachers from different gharanas or schools of music within the Indian classical tradition.
On 2 occasions now, I have actually been extremely honored to create music for the Jamaat. In both cases, on Maulana Hazrat Imam's Golden and Diamond Jubilee, I was commissioned to take Javi Dilgir's melody, Nur Rasulillah, and reorchestrate it for full orchestra. And so what became the nasheed is actually based on that melody. And in both cases, I got to work with orchestrators and engineers and producers and then a full-size symphony orchestra in creating the anthem for Maulana Hazrat Imam. And then a few years ago at the Diamond Jubilee, actually performed it at Aiglemont with a hand-picked group of musicians.
I'm also humbled by the art forms that I continue to practice. Kathak and classical piano both, and just piano as an instrument of incredible musical capacity, potential. They both have this ability to get me both really down about things I can't do on my instrument, whether it be the piano or even my feet, and then incredibly just euphoric when I've achieved something. And so that humility, I think, is one of the through lines of being a musician.
So I've been very fortunate in that the timing of my career corresponded with a lot of things in the Ismaili community. So I was asked to play at the Direct Energy Center when Hazrat Imam came to open the Aga Khan Museum. Salim and Suleiman were very kind enough to choose me to join them in Dubai for the Jubilee Games, and I got a chance to work with them and perform for the closing ceremonies. I also managed to be selected to play for the Stories production, which toured actually all of the United States with 20 or 30 artists from all over North America. So I was very fortunate to be able to do that. So yeah, I've had a number of opportunities, alhamdulillah. It was incredible. It just amazing. Because what it allowed me to do was to connect with people in a way that otherwise I would never have had the opportunity. Just the sense of, okay, for example, at Jubilee Games, performing for 15,000 people in the stadium, knowing that it was also being streamed to, 250,000 people around the world. I mean, there's no way that you can recreate that, or even, how do I even put that into words except for, wow.
Probably I was 13 or 14 years old in Karachi, and we all dressed up very nicely, and it was in the Sheraton Hotel, and we played there, and Hazrat Imam walked past, and so those were some really exciting moments, and I'm so ever so grateful that the way I was looked after by my brothers and my sisters and the whole Jamaat, like when I was performing for the orchestra in Garden as a very young boy. So I think I owe that to that, that love was instilled in me from a very young age, from having those wonderful experiences.
I had the opportunity and the privilege to participate in Jubilee Arts, where I presented a spoken word art installation, which also consisted of me playing musical instruments. And it was under my alias Infinite Possibilities. I thoroughly enjoyed the gala at the Aga Khan Museum, where I got to meet fellow artists and collaborators who to this day I cherish. As such, I think Jubilee Arts was a very important initiative that the Imam has undertaken, and I'm looking forward to the next Jubilee Arts and looking forward to meaningful ways to contribute on some level.
So my grandma always say that, I'm gonna say this in Farsi, that music ruda zinda mukana. What means, so the definition is that music makes souls alive or happy. So this is my lesson from singing.
I know that sometimes people say that about music that it's a universal language, and I feel it's actually a language at a soul level. That when you listen to music, we all understand, without really understanding what whether this music is from Japan or China or Morocco or Argentina. But our basic reaction to music is that like our soul knows.
One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that music mimics life. Playing an instrument is like anything in life. So if you want to get better at it and you want to have success at it, you just have to work hard at it. You can't just expect that something is going to come to you because it's just going to come to you. You have to sit down, you have to make a plan, you have to execute your plan, and you have to put in the time to get there. Just like life. If you want to do anything in life, you have to know what you want to do, have a plan, execute the plan, and inshallah you'll get there.
My advice for young, aspiring musicians within our Jamaat would be to never give up and to always persevere in advocating for yourself. There's probably hundreds of different reasons not to pursue a field that is so niched and different from what you're probably seeing your friends pursue, but there are a million reasons why it's the right path for you. So never forget why you're on this journey and the happiness that your music brings to you and those around you.
There's a formula to how to make a living in the arts, and to me the formula is 33%, 33%, 34%. 33% is your abilities, whatever they are. How skilled you are, how technically proficient you are, how talented you are, all those things, and being able to create art. That's 33%. The other 33% is being able to work in a team. It is, it's not enough that you just come up with something that you feel good about musically or visually or whatever it is that you do. You've also got to be able to work with the people around you to make that vision become a reality. So that's all of the team of engineers and producers and agents and people around you. You've got to be able to work with them. You have to be able to work with a client. I love being able to create pieces of music here, but if the client doesn't like it, guess what? I got to throw it out and do it again. And you have to remember that this is that kind of world, especially in music for film and television. So those are the two halves of that formula. And then 34%, pure luck. Being at the right place at the right time. Meeting someone, later that person remembers you and remembers to connect you to this. It bears repeating. Just be a good person. Be good with people. Be good to the people around you. You never know how a chance meeting with someone in an elevator, at a bus stop, can connect you to something that you may have been pursuing for a while, and suddenly that actually starts to become a reality.
It's definitely worth it to get involved in some form of art, whatever form interests you, and to pursue that. It's an important part of relating to other human beings and learning about the world, and it's complementary to any other education that you might get in your life.
My whole family has been my biggest supporters. They have stood by me every step of the way. They have supported, guided, and mentored me. I also wanted to thank the whole Jamaat for being there for me. Without them, I wouldn't be where I am today.
این واقعا الهام بخش بود. این باعث می شود من بخواهم درس های کلارینت خود را از سر بگیرم. زیرا همانطور که می دانید من قبلا در گروه راهپیمایی اسماعیلی کلگری بودم. ما اکنون از برخی از نوازندگان با استعداد که از بخش مراسم بزرگداشت دایموند جوبلی هستند خواهیم شنید. آنها در مورد تجربیات خود و چگونگی تاثیرات آن تجربیات بر زندگیشان صحبت خواهند کرد.
I remember that moment so very clearly. I was actually doing my dishes at the time, humming to myself as I usually do, and my phone was nowhere in sight. And for some reason, I had the sudden urge to turn off the tap and dry my hands and walk over to the kitchen table where my phone was placed face down, and it wasn't audibly ringing. And I turned over the phone, and lo and behold, there was an incoming call. And it read Guvia, France. And I knew exactly where that was. And so I recall taking a deep breath and sitting down, answering the call, and speaking to the wonderful and kind voice on the other end. And initially I had the range of expected human emotions: shock, disbelief, excitement, humbled, overwhelmed. And as I began to become aware of how special the ask was, I was overwhelmed with gratitude. I recall Maulana Haji Imam saying something to the effect of, "I place my hand on the shoulders of each and every one of you." And in that moment, I felt wholly his presence and his hand on my shoulders.
When I first found out I was invited to play at Aiglemont, I was shocked, to say the very least. In fact, what had actually happened was I received a phone call. I answered the phone, and I was told about this amazing opportunity to be one of the performers to present at the homage ceremony. And my reaction was to say, "That's fantastic, thank you so much. Can I call you tomorrow to let you know?" And my wife, who has passed away since, had mentioned to me, she said, "Did you actually just say to the people at Aiglemont that you are going to think about this?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "No, you pick up the phone right now, call them back and say that you would be very honored to be a part of the homage ceremony." And of course I did pick up the phone right away and phone back and tell them that I was immensely humbled, and it was such a privilege. I was in so much shock that I had been asked. I wasn't actually sure what was happening, and I'm glad that I was put to my senses and called back right away. Also, having been invited to be at Aiglemont, my nerves were shot. I was really, really nervous and realized that this was not only important for myself, but for my family, for the Jamaat, and if nothing else, this was the absolute most important musical endeavor that I would ever have an opportunity to be a part of.
Our first couple of days at the conservatory, where we were practicing, rehearsing, creating, collaborating, they were nerve-wracking. They were scary. It was meeting a new group of people and needing at the same time to open up as soon as possible so that we could start working together and creating a piece. And so we had, Tajik, Syrian, Afghani, American, British, Canadian brothers and sisters sitting in a room needing to feel confident in themselves and their own traditions. And so we actually spent the first little bit of rehearsals becoming acquainted with each other's traditions and getting to shine as artists, which I think, when you collaborate, you need to have that sense of confidence and ability to bring your voice to the table. We got there based on this foundation of we're comfortable as artists, we know where we can contribute individually, and then it became iteration. It became bringing up ideas and throwing things back and forth, and some days it was really hard, and we were in a room with a bunch of artists and trying to coordinate instrumentalists and vocalists in different areas and of different musical traditions. But in the end, we just kept on pushing through with the same vision, and in a matter of I think it was between 5 and 8 days, came up with a piece that really reflected many of the major traditions of the Jamaat. And so that process was eye-opening in terms of how we work with others in general.
But by far the most significant challenge was the ask itself. I mean, it was a magnanimous task. When you think about bringing together musicians from all corners of the world who speak different languages, coming from different music idioms, expressing, creating, learning, and teaching artistic ideas in a diversity of ways, whether that be by rote listening or notated music. And then to create a 20-minute continuous devotional piece to accompany our beloved institutional leaders in a symbolic march, one that is an expression of love and devotion and prayer and supplication, and also one that would hopefully resonate with every Murid across the globe in some way at some point in time in that musical expression. It just seemed and is an insurmountable task. And to me, that was the most significant challenge, but I say that with a caveat because in hindsight, on reflecting and upon introspection, and now I can say this, months and years later, that it was by far the biggest blessing, because that process itself was rigorous and an exercise in pluralism in a way, and the learnings from that continue to have ripple effects.
It was a really big highlight to be able to connect with so many different people and to learn about their stories and to really realize that we really truly were and are one Jamaat. It was also a very difficult process. It was difficult in the sense that everybody was bringing forth their best and wanted, of course, to have a voice. And I think that we really did an amazing job, if I may say so, of being able to unify those voices and to have a shared voice, a one voice of the Jamaat worldwide to be able to present on that day. There were many, many moments during that whole experience that we could feel the hand of the Imam on our shoulder as we performed and as we practiced and as we went through the beautiful exercises in trying to get this music together. And there were so many moments during those practices and during the performance where you just felt so emotional and overcome with love and a sense of togetherness that it was a truly unique and very, very beautiful experience.
Music really is a global language, and it was our love of the art and desire to do something great for the Imam that really moved us to work together and push through some of the language and cultural differences that we ended up overcoming and together making something really beautiful.
One key moment that had happened actually during the rehearsals was when Maulana Hazar Imam himself came to observe the group performing. And that experience was unlike any other experience. But I think it would be best summarized by saying that you really understood and knew what it meant to be an Ismaili, to be a part of a larger global community. Also, the sense of diversity, the sense of pluralism, the sense of love, and the sense of togetherness, and all for such a beautiful moment. It was an experience like no other, and an experience that I am extremely grateful for. My spiritual journey still continues to this day because of that ceremony, and has guided me in many ways musically, and also in many other aspects of my life, and has guided the type of person I wanted to become and the type of person I'm still becoming. I am eternally grateful for these moments.
The couple of days leading up to July 11th, it was raining, it was kind of cold, not the ideal weather for a group that was supposed to be singing on an outdoor stage. And so there was a real concern that we might not be able to perform, and that our hard work might not see the light of day. No pun intended. And at the same time, some people were kind of moved forward with this faith that they would be able to share our work with the Imam and with the Jamaat. And when the day came, the sun came out. The stage dried up, and I remember one of the staff on the ground saying, it was the Imam cleaning it's the streets being cleaned before the imam's ceremony was the rain just washing the driveway and the area that we were singing on. It was such an incredible experience, and being on the property amongst a beautiful forest that was really serene and calm, and an experience I will remember for the rest of my life.
بینش های خیلی عالی. لطفاً در بازتاب جمعه شب هفته آینده برای تماشای یک برنامه ویژه کووید با ما همراه باشید. همزمان با پخش واکسین در سراسر کانادا، ما می‌دانیم که سوالات زیادی در مورد زمان واکسین، کارایی، امنی، در دسترس بودن و موارد دیگر وجود دارد. البته اگر در استرالیا یا نیوزلند زندگی می‌کنید، در این صورت به شما تبریک می‌گویم. جهان می‌تواند چیزهای زیادی از شما بیاموزد. بنابراین لطفاً به سایت iicanada.org مراجعه کرده و یک سوال ویدیویی ارسال کنید و سپس هیئت از متخصصان واکسین در مورد پخش یا عدم پخش آنها تصمیم خواهند گرفت. شوخی کردم. لطفاً تمام سوالات خود را ارسال کنید و ما واقعاً امیدواریم که برای نمایش بسیار مهم با ما بپیوندید. وقت من با شما در این هفته به پایان رسیده است. خیلی ممنونم که من را با خود داشتید و فقط میخواهم بگویم من میدانم که این مدت طولانی در انزوا بودن کار آسانی نیست. بسیاری از ما عزیزان خود را از دست دادند یا از آنها جدا شدند. شاید ما برای آن آغوش گرفتنها یا اوقات شخصی که بسیار از ما قبلا او را پیش پا افتاده میگرفتیم دلتنگ شده باشیم. من بیشتر از 1 سال از پدر، مادر و خواهر دور بودم. بنابراین من فقط آنها را از آن طرف مرز احوال میگیرم. آنها در مورد من بی تفاوت هستند، اما واقعا دلشان برای نوه‌شان تنگ شده است. این پسر من امری است. بنابراین ما فقط میخواهیم بگوییم که دوستتان داریم. دلتنگ شما هستیم. ما بی‌صبرانه منتظر روزی میمانیم که دوباره مثل همه خانواده‌ها بتوانیم روی صفحه بنشینیم و کبی خوشی کبی غم را تماشا کنیم. من درست میگویم؟ یا علی مدد پدر بزرگ، مادر بزرگ. صحبت از ساوندترک. لطفاً با ما همراه باشید تا این موسیقی میانی را که چند دقیقه دیگر پخش خواهد شد با هم بشنویم. این بدین معنی است که من باید صحبت‌هایم را تمام کنم، اما این بسیار سرگرم کننده بود. من حتی نمیخواهم بروم. بنابراین یک هفته عالی داشته باشید و امیدوارم هفته شما پر از موسیقی عالی باشد. در واقع ما مجبور نیستیم این پارتی را تمام کنیم، زیرا جمعه شب است. بیایید مکالمه خود را ادامه دهیم. برای من یک توییت همراه با آهنگ یا آهنگ‌های مورد علاقه خود ارسال کنید. مهم نیست که به چه زبانی باشد. انگلیسی، عربی، فرانسوی، فارسی. آن آهنگ‌هایی که شما را در طی این همگیری شاد نگه داشتند. زیرا به هر حال من به لیست پخش جدید اسپاتیفای احتیاج دارم. شما می توانید برای من یک توییت ارسال کنید یا از طریق اینستاگرام زلیخا نتو به من وصل شوید. و اگر شکایت دارید آنها را به حساب تیک تاک من بفرستید، زیرا من هنوز نمیدانم که آن چگونه کار میکند. بنابراین شاید احتمالاً هرگز آنها را دریافت نکنم. خیلی خوب، ممنونم. خداحافظ، بونسوار، سلام، یالی مدد. در امان باشید.
Ali roho ravane man, Ali aram jane man, Ali zikre zabane man, Ali goyam, Ali joyam, Ali goyam, Ali joyam, Ali goyam, Ali joyam, Ali goyam, Ali joyam, Ali goyam, Ali
Yay! I think that worked. I better have been recording.